guys, I'm looking forward to this episode with Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources, and we're going to do a 2019 elk season recap for Chris. I know he had some hunting in Colorado and then finished up in Arizona, and I think he even went back to Colorado for a day or two to try and fill his own tag. Before we get to that, I want to thank you guys for listening and giving full support to this podcast. I also want to thank the sponsors of this podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com. My friend Cody Nelson is the optics manager there. You can reach him with any optical needs at all: binos, spotting scopes, tripods, range-finding binoculars, tripods, anything to do with glassing. If you have glassing questions, just give Cody a call, 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also send him an email direct at optics@gohunt.com. They've been a great sponsor of mine. If you guys have any optical needs, you want to buy binos or spotting scopes, just give Cody a call. Tell him that Jay Scott sent you, and he's going to take care of you. I also want to thank KUIU Ultralight Hunting. KUIU is the gear that I wear on all of my hunts. You can go to my Instagram page and see I do question and answers, and I handle a lot of stuff coming from you guys having questions about KUIU. You can also go to KUIU.com, that's KUIU.com, to find out more. Thank them for their sponsorship. Also, phonescope.com, use the JScott19 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount. That is the digiscoping adapter that I use with my iPhone X. I use the adapter on my 15s as well as my spotting scope, and I capture all the video and photos that you see on my Instagram page with the phone scope adapter. Use the JScott19 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount. And then onxmaps.com. Go to onxmaps.com, sign up for the phone app, and you're going to get a 20% discount when you use the JScott19 promo code. Now, if you don't get prompted for the JScott19 promo code, they will send you an email and just enter JScott19, and that's going to save you 20%. I use OnX Maps every day for hunting, fishing, and my real estate business. I love the feature that you can go back and forth from topo to aerial to hybrid. I love the fact that you can use the tracking or the breadcrumb feature that you can track yourself in and out. I like to be able to import and export maps in Google Earth. I also like to use the OnX desktop portion. You guys can sign up for 1 state or 50 states. Save 20% by using the JScott19 promo code. All right, guys, let's get right to this episode with Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources. And again, thanks for all of the loyal support of this podcast. If you would like to reach out to me, you can send me an email at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can also send me a direct message on Instagram. I love fielding your questions. I love seeing the success of the animals that you guys have harvested. And if you have anything you want to discuss, just send me a message. I'm happy to talk with you about it. So let's get right to it. Guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we have Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources. We've got him fresh off of elk season. He just arrived back in Kansas after spending some time in Colorado and Arizona. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, my friend. How are you?
Oh, good. Can you still hear some bugles in your sleep?
Yeah, well, I would like to. Unfortunately, I had to leave. I left Arizona a little early. Colorado was a little tough. I didn't hear many bugles in Colorado. Like, probably can count on one hand. But Arizona was just absolutely, I mean, literally unreal. Just unreal. Like, back in the days when, I first went down there, and met you, and I mean, it was, oh my goodness. So, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Why don't we start at the beginning and talk a little bit about Colorado, and then we can talk about Arizona. So I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, well, and I said this when I called. You may have got me in a good state of mind, because today was one of those days where, you ever start a day and you have a plan, and you think, man, this is a good plan. And then the day looks at you and laughs and says, oh, no, I have a plan. And so you're like, well, but I have my plan, and we're going to do my plan. And then the day this laughs at you again and says, oh, no, you're going to do my plan. And then you play with your plan all day today. So, yeah. So Colorado, the funny part about that one is, well, the frustrating, and I don't even know how to frame it because I didn't even wrap my head around it. So for those that are familiar and have kept up with these past couple years, all right, I have family so my mom's side of the family is very large. Her youngest brother, which is my uncle, is only 3 years older than I am. So we grew up more like best friends. Well, fast forward, he gets married, has kids. One of his sons, Abe, is an absolute avid hunter, and he's good. I mean, Abe's a legit killer. He's a good hunter. But he's, so 3 years ago he was 14? I think that's what it was. So Colorado affords non-resident youth hunters a $100 elk tag. I mean, you can't beat. I mean, normal non-resident elk tag is going to run you $680 to $700, somewhere around there. So I told Abe and Tom, I said, for these next several years, while he's still eligible for a cheap elk tag, we just need to exploit that and just have him, have you guys come out and we'll elk hunt and take advantage of a $100 elk tag. Well, because they are from upstate New York and they, flatlanders, and heck, I'm a flatlander anymore. I choose to go to a couple areas that are a little bit easier, a little bit lower elevation, a little bit easier on them to hike in, and it just from a logistics standpoint, it's just a little easier. Well, I don't even know how to wrap. I mean, like I said, I don't even know how to wrap my head around it other than to say, apparently, no, it's not apparently. It's not apparently. I mean, it's just flat out the fact that there's a bunch of people that have figured out where I hunt, and I heard it numerous times. And unsolicited, several different groups told Tom this, point blank, and literally, quote, well, we normally hunt over in such and such an area, but, we figured we'd come over and check this out because we heard Chris Rowe hunts here, and so, we figured it must be pretty good. I mean,
nice.
Oh, dude. The number
You're a celebrity. What can we say?
Yeah, well, geez, Pete. I'll tell you, I do enjoy teaching. I do enjoy talking to folks and sharing all that stuff. But man, there are some times when being anonymous is really, really nice. There was opening week. It fluctuated between 15 and 30 different vehicles at the trailhead. Everybody piling in, going up the same valleys and drainages. And it was not only the people that left their normal area. I mean, literally, I'm sitting there listening to, and I feel bad for them. And I know for a fact there are going to be people that were at this spot. There are people listening right now that I'm talking about you. And I'm not talking. I'm not trying to be rude or I just feel bad that you burned that time, because some people drove several hours away from where they normally hunt. And what you didn't realize is I was in my truck and I was listening. You didn't even realize I was there, but I'm in my truck listening to people talk, and I'm going, okay, you just said you left such and such an area. I know that area. I hunt that area. That area's got good elk. It's just an area that probably Tom and Abe are not going to be able to function well and hike and perform as well. So that's the only reason why we didn't go there. But the area you just left is a good area. And it's an area I know. And I know how to perform there. And there's elk there. You can do well there. But you left there. And you even said that there was less people there. We were getting to elk, and there's hardly anybody there, but we came over here. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you just left elk, and you left low intensity, low hunter pressure to come over here where there's stupid hunter pressure, and all the elk have just now gotten bumped and pushed out into either different private lands, or they've been there, or now what was actually the case in a couple of spots is they just pushed them into the just nastiest, just brutal country that nobody wants to go into or can go into, and the elk were silent. I just sat there and I'm like, man, you just wasted 3, 4, 5 days chasing a rabbit hole that you didn't need to chase. And the only reason why I heard the people say, well, because Chris hunts here, it must be good. No. I hunt in places in north central Colorado. I hunt places in central Colorado, White River National Forest, and I hunt several places in south central Colorado. And I choose the areas depending on either who I'm hunting with or the experience that I want for that particular year. And there's reasons why this past couple of years I was down in this particular area, and largely, one, it's because Tom and Abe needed a little bit of an easier spot, and B, I've got a lot of sentimental value to the place. It's one of the places where I started elk hunting way back when, and so I just enjoyed walking up some of the old drainages and some of the old valleys. I'm like, it's just cool. And but there was not only did people leave their areas to come there to hunt, but now there's a guy, and I just sat there dumbfounded. There's a guy that parks at the trailhead in a fifth-wheel camper. And he's the type of guy that as soon as anybody pulls into the parking lot, he's out of his camper. And he's going over and talking to them. Oh, what are you doing? What are you seeing? Where are you going? You elk hunting? You deer hunting? He's just talk. He's a nice guy. And so he just tries to pull as much information out of that hunter as possible. And he starts to share information with that hunter as well. The thing that people didn't realize is it's every single time. So if you have Hunter A, Hunter B, and Hunter C, Hunter A pulls into the parking lot. I sat and watched it. I'm like, oh, my word. Hunter A pulls into the parking lot. Hunter A pulls into the parking lot. He's out of his camper. Over. He's talking about elk hunting, deer hunting, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? Okay. So the guy, Hunter A, starts giving, well, we're going to go up here, we're going to hunt here, and yeah, I want to, okay, all right, cool, go. Yeah, well, and then he just commences to say, well, there was a bull bugling up there, and then somebody went up here, and they got an elk over here, and he's the guy that wants to have all the information and be the most important person on the mountain. But all the information that Hunter A just gave him, when Hunter B rolls in the parking lot, flip, out of the camper he comes. Now he's talking to Hunter B. And every ounce of information that Hunter A just told him, he now relates to Hunter B. So Hunter B tells him information that Hunter B heads up the valley, whatever, back in the camper he goes. Another person, Hunter C, comes in the parking lot. Whoop, out of his camper he comes. Now, all the information he got from Hunter A and Hunter B now goes to Hunter C. There's not a, it might as well be, there's not a single, if people didn't realize the person they were talking to was just absolutely hemorrhaging information. There was no secret. If you got into elk and you thought, man, that's awesome, I got into some elk, hopefully I can get back into some elk, and you came down to the trailhead for some reason, and you told them that, everybody in that trailhead now knows exactly where you got into elk. And right. The funny, I just, again, dumbfounded. Every single story at some point included the story of, and I quote, hey, have you ever heard of Chris Rowe? You heard of Chris Rowe? Yeah, Chris Rowe hunts here. Yep, in 2017, yep, right up here, he killed an elk right up, and you go to this side, you go here, go about halfway, you go up there. He had every detail. I've never talked to this guy. There's only one person in the world, literally, one person that knows where I killed that elk. And apparently, somehow he talked, he said to somebody, he said to something, and now this guy, he's a nice guy, but he just has to be. He just hemorrhages information, and there is not a secret in the world down there, and he's got a mind like a steel trap. So he remembers names, he remembers faces, he remembers locations, he remembers dates, he remembers whether people had such and such a backpack and whether the strap was. I mean, this guy's got a memory like a steel trap, and he will share it with everyone.
Just a mayor,
so
huh?
That first week of season was just worthless.
Well, not to mention the first week of season, I mean, I was over at the OTC on private, and it was just slow going. I mean, it was so dry. I don't know. It's so dry at the OTC ranch. I don't know about where you were. They really didn't get bugling till about the 15th of September.
Yep, exactly. No, it was dead.
I mean, it was just tough. It was tough.
It was dead. Now, we ended up, so there's some places that we know that we can go and we can glass and we can find. I mean, there were some small bowls. Literally we watched a couple different bachelor groups of, young, raghorns, 2.5-year-old bulls, sparring and carrying on and that type of stuff. But both, Abe killed that really good bull a couple years ago. Last year they both got into some really good mature bulls and almost got it done. And then this year we found a couple other really nice mature bulls. And so as soon as Abe is killed an elk, and he was literally he was literally getting ready to draw his bow back last year when the wind swirled and blew out that really nice bull. And so we decided this year, Abe was like, you know what, actually it'd be cool if Dad, because, Thomas never killed an elk. So we were like, all right, let's see if we can't get Tom an elk. And so sure enough, we ended up laying eyes on a really nice mature bull, and at that point, okay, hunt's over. Now that's the bull we want. Just didn't pan out. The day we were able to get on him was the day that I decided, we went different directions, and of course Tom and Abe ended up getting on him, start calling, just couldn't seal the deal, but it was close. So that was the bull that we wanted to hunt from there on out. It just didn't happen. Yeah, and like you said, they were just absolutely quiet except for that one morning. That this bull and another bull just decided to make just a blitzkrieg run right through the valley, and they were just going nuts. But they were just in and out, gone. So yeah, it was slow. And so based on the behavior, lack of elk, and just stupid hunter pressure, I was like, you know what, I'm out. I'm headed to Arizona early. So I ended up heading down to Arizona 2 days early. Got down there, met up with the guys that I was going to be guiding, and I think this is a legit question. Did you ever have a rule about people coming to camp and being helpers, assistants? You have a hunter, but he wants to bring friends. Were you the one that had a rule on that, or am I thinking of someone else?
Well, I definitely tried to screen that as much as possible.
Yeah.
If you've got great help, it's really good. If you've got help that's, lazy, can't follow directions, can't find a spot in the dark, over-exaggerates, embellishes, then, I try to nip that in the bud as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I think we talked about, I had a client that ended up happening. There was a helper in camp that ended up being an absolute train wreck. Well, this year, it was going to be a 2-on-1 guided deal, and these guys are RHR subscribers. So it was going to be, I knew, I was like, all right, well, that's a plus. And so there should be a good, there should be good dialogue. We should have a good time from that standpoint. But then they're like, yeah, we're going to bring several other guys. I'm like, oh, here we go. So I lined it out very early on, like you said, just try to screen it. Well, long story short, it was awesome. These guys were absolute, unbelievable assets. It was a fun camp. We all just meshed perfectly. It was just fun, funny, just laughing. Just constant laughing and just having a great time. And then the elk hunting was just incredible. Dude.
Tell me about it.
the thing that I think is, again, for me in an education standpoint, the thing that I really just latched onto this year, and it was while I was there, and then especially I did listen to your podcast with Steve. The unbelievable difference, and I don't think people appreciate this. And remind me to segue to, remember when I texted you and I asked you if the OT6 was still rocking or if it shut down briefly? Okay, because that's going to come up. Remind me to touch on that because it's important. I don't think people understand and really appreciate how much difference there can be across a single unit in elk behavior from just one area to another. So there are, in Unit 9, obviously, people put in for Unit 9 because they want a giant bull, or at least an option at a giant bull or having some, good bugling action. In these past years, giant bulls have been tough to come by just because of weather and late season tags, the whole host of things that you have already talked about before, okay? Well, this year, if there was ever a year to draw that tag, it was this year. Not only because of the way that last fall had good forage production, it had a wet winter, good spring green up, but the fall before, both late season hunts apparently were just miserable as far as hardly anybody filled the tag. It just was difficult because the elk weren't there. So we had a bunch of bulls survive and gain an age, gain one more year under their belt. So they're going to have a little bit better potential. And then the environmental conditions basically ensured that they were going to reach pretty much almost 100% of their max genetic potential. So it was a great year to have the tag. But there are some people that say, or that, they see the pictures, from the outfitters or whatever of a 380, 390, 400-inch bull, and they're like, that's what I want. Okay. If you want a 380, 390, 400-inch plus bull, those only represent, and I think talking with the other guys this year, I think it was like 1.6 or 1.8% of the bulls met that criteria from the game camera surveys they were doing. So people need to understand, if you want to go after that caliber of bull, okay, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Yes, it's there. It could be there somewhere. But they live in particular areas, and you might not have a quote-unquote sexy hunt. You may be into some, in that low country, sagebrush country, to where you're just sitting water. It's a potentially completely different hunt experience. Versus, like my guys, this was they were brand new elk hunters. They'd been putting in for a while. They've been on one other elk hunt, so they were newbies. I mean, just flat newbies. My guy that killed his bull, that's the first elk he's ever killed, and that's literally the first animal he's ever killed with a bow. That's how new they were. And so
that's awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean, mid 350s, pushing 360 class bull. Yeah, that'll work. So, but the relevant point behind that is when we talked originally, they just wanted, they're not looking for a giant. They just, let's go find the biggest bull we can, but we want to learn as much as possible. That was the whole point behind them getting a hold of, and trying to book me, because they were like, this is our opportunity to go around the mountain with Chris Rowe and learn everything that we've seen on the elk module in person. And I was like, absolutely, right on. So that's what I told him. I said, okay, if that's the case, then we are going to focus on those areas where we are going to hopefully maximize our encounters. Now, it may not be with the 400-inch bull, but hopefully we're going to maximize our encounters with those 340, 350, maybe 360 bulls. And at that point, if it had been a really pretty 330 bull, they would have probably put it on the ground. And quite honestly, as the hunt progressed, I mean, heck, we had a beautiful 6x6 that was probably a 300, maybe a 310 bull, and Lowell, yeah, he put an effort on that one to try. I mean, they just wanted a fun hunt. So we focused on the areas in the pines, because what I found was it seemed like the forage was better in the pines, and the water was a little better in the pines. And I knew there's a lot of guys that don't like hunting the pine, the big pine, because it can be difficult because how open it is. Brother, oh my. I mean, oh my goodness. Now, I'll say that. I know for a fact, and I've heard you talk to outfitters, and you'll hear, on your other podcasts, and you'll hear, you'll talk to, these outfitters, and they're like, well, we were in the bulls every day. And you're like, yeah, sure you were, buddy. You just kind of, you're like, no, okay, whatever. Dude, we were in, and when I say we were into, I mean, they were like within inches of eating an arrow. Multiple screaming bulls every single time we went out. We would literally, and Steve talked about it a little bit, okay, where's the water? Okay. Where's the good grass? Okay, which way is the wind direction blowing? Okay, it's blowing that way. Okay, kind of give, okay, this is where we think they're going to be bedding. All right, let's go ahead. We'll go down. We'll park here. Let's go ahead and get ourselves in here. Let's just stage here and see what happens. And, oh, geez, I mean, you get yourself, in the morning, literally we would sit there and be like, all right, let's just, brainstorm where we're going to be. We literally pull up, turn the truck off. Literally we had to sit in the truck a couple times. We were like, well, let's let him walk away a little bit before we actually chase him. It was insane. And when we did get on a bull, the problem was it wasn't one bull. It wasn't like we were like, oh, here's a herd bull, and he's got a couple cows, let's go after him. No. It was like, oh, here's a herd bull, he's got oh, crap, there's another one. Oh, shoot, okay, we've got 3. Oh, crap, their cows are, dang it, here come their cows, and all the cows are coming together. Now it's one of what you call that meatball. It's just an absolute scream fest while the different bulls are trying to keep their cows separate. The cows are wanting to come in. They're getting downwind. We're trying to juggle the wind. It became chaos. It was awesome, dude. It was so much fun. I called in a number of just, good, healthy, mature bulls well above that 350 range that, we had a couple misses before. We had 3 misses, missed shots before we finally got the bull that Bobby got. And, that was just, perfect 22-yard broadside, just 12. He 12 ringed it. But it was one of those things where the shot, anyway, it worked.
Did you get some good video?
I think the video, well, the funny part is the video of his hunt, I think, is going to be pretty good. The problem was what he perceived and I perceived was, as you know this from video and yourself, what you watch on the ground in real time does not necessarily match with what your video shows you. You know what I mean? Sometimes you perceive things a little bit off. And so when he made that shot, the way the bull spun and the way the arrow came out, in my perception, it looked like the arrow came out way far back, maybe out of the, the paunch area. I'm like, oh no. And when the bull ran off, Bobby was able to see that this bull had his back end wasn't working, and he had a major limp on his right rear side. And Bobby's perception was, oh no, how did I either gut shoot this animal, or how did I hit him in the flank, the rear leg? We were our minds were just like, this just did not happen. We just had 3 misses, okay? And now we have this. This is just not happening. So we took our sweet time making sure everything was going to be done right. And long story short, we finally start following the blood. And I think we walked like 20 steps, and we look up, like, oh, no, your bull's laying right there. No, he heart shot 12 ring that thing perfectly. And what I saw, I don't know, the arrow came out, and it just looked like it was far back, but it wasn't. And the reason why the bull was limping, what that Bobby saw, when the bull spun, he went through a deadfall. He literally broke the lower portion of his leg, that hard cannon bone.
Wow.
He snapped that thing clean in half. So he only had 3 legs going. So
wow.
It was insane. So Bobby he 12 ring that thing just as pretty as you please. We got all the guys. Luckily, it was funny. One of the few areas where we had cell reception, so that he was able to get a hold of the other guys. All the other guys came in with their packs. We were only 3/4 of a mile from the road, and I mean, we had that thing quartered up, cut up, in bag, packed up, and everybody just whoop, out we go. And I mean, it was wham bam, thank you ma'am, done. Then we went back out, and they got on about a 370 plus bull that just it was incredible. It was incredible. But
how was the first part of the hunt with the full moon for you? Were they going nuts the whole time, or did they slow up at the beginning, or how was it?
It was wide open the entire time, and I think
for going nuts.
It was for us. It was wide open the entire time, but I think that's only because we chose those areas that had a higher density of elk. And if you look, and again, and that's where I think we can segue to what I asked you before. We had every day from the day one right on through, it was just wide open. However, all of a sudden we had one day where it was. I mean, literally the night before, it was just an absolute scream fest. He had a shot opportunity, and just went low. They were just going nuts. There were 4. I think there was at least 3. There might have been 4. These bulls are going nuts. Now it's dark. The bull he shot at really had no clue that he was even shot at, because he just went over and started messing around with the other bulls and raking a tree and everything else. So it gets dark, and I'm like, just let's get the heck out of here before they wind us, and we'll just save this. We'll come back in the morning. Well, that's when we had that weather system come through. A little bit of weather system come through. Next morning, the entire landscape was just crickets. I mean, dead. I mean, there weren't birds flying, there weren't squirrels running around, and we were up on a ridge top where we could hear, a mile or more in any direction, and there was bulls bugling the night before all over the place, not a peep. And my buddy, so it was dead right there. The next day, my buddy, who guides for Vermejo Park Ranch, if anybody knows Vermejo Park, it's a gargantuan Ted Turner ranch. Their elk population is just insane as far as, bull to cow ratio, and then the age class. He was having the same thing, where it was just nonstop bugle fest, and then all of a sudden, the day after we had that dead spot, he has a dead. All of a sudden, Vermejo Park just shuts down. It's good. It went from scream fest to crickets. You couldn't buy an elk. And that's when I texted you. I'm like, hey, what's going on at Ox 6? You said it was still going and still cranking. Well, I think whether you're talking about in one particular unit, the 2 things that people really need to pay attention to is you can have markedly different experience depending on where you are in that unit. We had absolute scream fest every single outing for every day of our hunt, whereas Steve was saying, well, they were getting bugles, that hour and a half in the morning, and then maybe an hour or so in the evening, but he was hunting a different area in the unit. And then we had our friends that, some of the other outfitters that were, and even some of the guys, John and Josiah, they were chasing giants. And so if you're out on the far east or the far west, or you're out in the flats and the sagebrush, they weren't getting bugles at all. It was just dead. So depending on where you go and where you spend your time in your unit, I don't care if you're Arizona or if you're in Colorado in the mountains, you could have absolutely markedly different experiences just based on where all the elk are. And then the other one is, people were getting frustrated that, we're not hearing any elk. Well, don't. And again, I listened to these guys that said, well, we normally hunt over here, but we decided to come over here and check this out because, Chris Rowe hunted. You may be leaving elk that are not talking simply because you have a weather system coming through that the barometric pressure just has them shut down.
They like consistency. They're like turkeys, they're gobbling like crazy, and you get an inconsistent weather pattern, and all of a sudden I find that
Yes.
gobbling turkeys and bugling bull elk like consistency. Whatever that may be, they just like it to be the same.
Yes. And all of a sudden something comes through, and it will literally shut it down. The elk are standing right there. They are standing right there. They're bedding in the same spot. They're getting water in the same spot. They're eating in the same spot. And they aren't moving, and they ain't saying nothing. It's not because they're not there. It's because the weather system that moved through has just got them shut down. That's where you're going to have to give it a bit. Sit and stay and go, okay, I know that there's elk here. I'm seeing the tracks are right there. The droppings are right there. This wallow looks like something was getting water in. Okay, if the sign is there, the elk are there. But if it's just shut down, just understand there's probably a reason why it's shut down, and just give it a bit. Give it a day or 2 or 3. I remember, was it last year or the year before in Unit 9? I actually have a video of this on the elk module. I'm standing, so Unit 9, for those people who don't realize, it is on the south border of the Grand Canyon National Park. And the habitat from where people are hunting into the park doesn't change. There's just a 5-strand barbed wire fence. That's it. That's the only difference. And the elk get pushed, from the hunter pressure, the elk will absolutely get pushed into the park. And most of the time, in the park, it's like Estes Park or it's like Yellowstone. They're going nuts because they're not getting pressured, and all the elk get stacked in there. Well, it's September 27th, and I'm standing on the park boundary, and I just let the camera roll. You can hardly hear the wind going through the trees. It's so dead. I'm like, guys, September 27th. Of course they want to be screaming. They should be screaming. And we're on the edge of a national park where there's a pile of elk piled in, but yet you don't hear a peep. It's crickets. You can't say, well, it's because of hunter pressure. Oh, well, the elk got pushed out. Or, oh, the elk moved out. No, they didn't. They're right there. They just are shut down because of the weather. And I think people got caught up in that this year and kind of got panicky early and just started, at least in public land in Colorado, and just started running all over the place, not realizing they just needed to give it a little bit and let things unfold. I know it was a fun season in Arizona. We got done with that hunt. They only had me for 9 days, and then when I was done, they had to say goodbye, and so I decided to head back to Colorado. Went back to a couple spots to check it out. Hunter pressure again was just ridiculous. So this was my mistake. I decided, I've got so much stuff that I've got to do here in Kansas to get ready for some of the deer hunts. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. It was a good season. I ended up having a couple chances, but it didn't work out. I'm headed home. Literally, here we go. Okay, it was crickets. There was no elk bugling, nothing going on. Hunter pressure was high, so I was like, I'm out. I leave. The next day, a buddy of mine, his son, goes into one of the areas where I just was. Nope, weather system pushed out. 3 new bulls dropped in, and it was wide open. He ends up killing a just gourd. I'm guessing probably a 5 or 6 year old mature bull, just probably I'm guessing 6-year-old 6x6 that it was just a bugle fest. He was in the right place, right time. They dropped in. The weather system moved out. They started talking, and he just smoked one. I'm like, should have waited one day. One day. Oh, it's all right. He deserves it. He's a good kid. He's a good kid. He deserves it. So,
couple questions about Unit 9. It sounds like Unit 9, I've seen years like that where it's just insane, and it's hard to take some of the rougher years where you're just like, you're so used to it being so good. But how did the grass look throughout the unit, number one, and then how did the water, the tank situation, how was it?
Okay, but again, I will qualify. I did not venture. I stayed in the Big Pine. So in the Big Pine, so I don't know what it looked like anywhere else other than you go down south. I mean, it seems everybody that I talked to that was in, Upper Basin, down south, or out west, it was just not great. In the Pines, unfortunately, I was not very impressed. One of the better grasses that are in that one of the reasons why I think Unidine, that part of Arizona does so well at producing great elk population and gray bulls, that blue grama grass is a phenomenal forage, and it holds high quality even when the grass goes dormant. I did not see a lot of good grama grass growth. It seemed like the squirrel tail just took off this year. That was the only stuff that I saw that was popped. Squirrel tail is okay. It's not near as good as grama grass, in my opinion. So I'm a little worried about what the forage production is. At least where I was, the forage production did not look great. Now, the water situation. And I think Steve nailed this one. Some of the bigger tanks, the bigger dirt tanks that are in the big valleys that traditionally hold a lot of water, they still had water. The smaller tanks, the dirt tanks in the periphery areas, bone dry. Trick tanks, bunch of them, a lot of trick tanks still had water. But you and I both know if a group of elk have the choice between a trick tank and dirt, and a dirt tank, they're going to go to the dirt tank. They love it from a social standpoint. So I think some of the bigger tanks will still have water for a while, but they're not going to have water for very long. So if it doesn't start raining, it's going to get tricky. I think it's going to get tricky. So it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening, with the muzzleloader hunt going on, and then these upcoming rifle hunts or the later hunt, and see what the harvest is, because I have a feeling I think the elk are going to start piling in on water, and I think if people take advantage of that, there's going to be a bunch of elk dying. And I don't know what the forage, because the forage doesn't look that great, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next spring and next year as far as overall population and antler growth.
Was the antler growth, compared to what you've seen in Unit 9, was it the best you've ever seen as far as just solid bulls and extra points and kickers and what have you?
Yeah, for me. Now, again, I haven't been down there as long as you guys have. I mean, when was it the first time that you and I, was it 2012, maybe? Something like that?
Yep.
I haven't been down there as many years as you guys, obviously, but back in those, 2012, 13 or whatever, I remember it was some really good bulls that year that Monty had his tag. There were some really great bulls running around. But yeah, you're absolutely right. As far as, in recent history, oh my word. It's interesting that I think you and I talked about this, and I know I talked about it on one of my discussions on the elk module as far as antler production. You could see where this year a lot of bulls had maybe shorter, stunted fronts, but then the rest of their rack just exploded. So you could see where, the forage quality what they had in reserve from the winter going into spring, that's what's going to give you that initial antler growth in those your eye guards. But then as spring green up happens, that's when the rest of the growth on the thirds and fourths and fifths and all that, that's when that happens. Well, that's when that moisture cycle kicked in, and you guys had such an awesome green up down there. I think a lot of the bulls kind of got a lackluster start on their fronts, and then all of a sudden that green up kicked in, and I mean the tops. It was like every bull had. We literally started looking at fronts. We're like, we don't even care about the top because we know the top is going to look awesome. What do his fronts look like? If we're going to be picky. But it was amazing that, I mean, so many bulls just had incredible top ends this year. I mean, just they just look beautiful. I mean, even a 330 bull, you're like, wow, he's sexy. You know, he just looks good.
Okay, I've got a question. It's a question and a theory of mine, and I want you to hear what I'm saying, and then I want your theory on top of mine, or your response to my theory. So the OT6 ranch this year, I would say the antler growth is average at best. Now, condition-wise, obviously Colorado had a very, very big winter. We had cold temperatures. We had lots of snow. What I've noticed, we have a handful of bulls that are bigger than they were last year, but I think a lot of that is just age, and they just happen to be a little bit better. We don't really have any bulls that I would say blew up like a lot of my buddies in Arizona. You know, bulls were at maximum capacity.
Yeah. One
thing that I think potentially my theory is that the Colorado bulls, and I can only speak about the OT6, is that it was, you know, cold, snowy, you know, conditions, body conditions after they dropped their antlers, going into growing their antlers. I think they were probably not in great body condition, okay? And in my opinion, elk only have so many days to grow antlers. So if they start slow and their body is in a situation where they're trying to replenish body condition first, then once body condition is established, then they can go ahead and start pouring it into the antlers. My theory is that it was cold, it was snowy, their body condition wasn't great. They only have so many days to grow their antlers, and what I noticed is a lot of main beams, like our Creed bull, his main beam seemed shorter. His fifth points were noticeably shorter. He didn't grow his extra G6. He didn't grow his extra little devil point on his eye guard, and 10 to 15 inches smaller this year. Now, that's one bull. A bunch of other bulls noticed like the top ends seemed like the main beams were not as long, fifth points not as long. My theory is they entered into spring. It was cold. They weren't on green feed for a while. Then throw on top of that, even though I know that most of their antlers are done, we virtually had zero monsoon or zero, monsoon in Arizona, rains kick up to Colorado, and afternoon thunder showers. Right here where I spend the summers here in, Basalt, Carbondale, Aspen area, I mean, we went all summer and maybe had 2 or 3 rainstorms total. I mean, it was just not good at all. Very, very dry. And over at the OT6, very, very dry. So, do you believe my theory that they only have so many days to grow antlers and whoop, they're done? Okay, so what gets punished? The main beams, the fifth points. So that's what I want to know from you and your opinions.
Yeah, not a theory at all. It's dead on the money, and that I did literally that whole discussion I put, in August on antler development goes right down the line in the elk module. It goes right down the line and talks about that. Yeah. So a mature bull, roughly if you ballpark it, it's got about can have up to about 150 days of antler growth, if I'm remembering correctly. I think so. That's 5 months. Yeah. So, roughly about 100 for a mature bull, about 150 days. And you're absolutely right. So you think about it, they're not going to put anything extra into their antlers unless their body condition is above. If they've got that percent body fat, and they need to have a minimum percentage of protein in their diet in order to be able to put any extra in. Now, of course, they're going to throw something, and it's just all part of the overall growth. But they don't have any extra. So yeah, if you have, say you go into the fall with poor forage, okay, you don't have a lot of good high-quality feed on the landscape to start with. And then you have a cold, snowy winter, which means they have to look for food, dig through snow, push through snow for food, or they have to settle for lesser quality food going through winter. Well, each day their body condition is they might be able to maintain a little bit, but on average, their body is slowly deteriorating, okay, unless they've got really, really good feed and an easy winter, which that's not what you have. So their body's going to deteriorate slowly, which means when it comes time for them to start growing their antlers, they don't have much reserve to put into it. So that initial growth is going to be stunted. Now, you guys had correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding was it was a kind of a cold spring, kind of prolonged.
Yeah, even here, it seemed like, there was snow all over the mountains and the peaks until, way later than normal. Our runoff was way late. I just think it was a cold spring. And, from what I'm seeing on the antler growth, it's just, to be honest with you, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. It's average at best, and it's probably, if I'm more realistic, it's below average. And last year we came off the worst drought that area has had in 80 years, and our bulls actually looked good. My thinking is that it was basically hardly any winter, the winter before last, and they weren't as in bad of condition, and they were able to pour it on right away rather than having a prolonged spring.
If they've got say you had good forage production in the fall, and then an easy winter, well, then they have no limiting. They've got as much food, especially if it's high quality, like grama grass, which you guys have got down there. If you've got good, high quality forage and ample and a lot of it, and an easy winter, well, their body condition is good, and quite honestly, they can actually recover some of their body condition after the rut, to where when they start growing their antlers, they're not at as much of or at a deficit at all. And then you have your quote-unquote normal spring green up. Well, okay, bam, pour that one on. And literally, by the time that you get into summer, they're, like you said, they're already got, 80, 90% of their growth already done. Now it's just, they just coast into home plate, so to speak. And yeah, but if you have a drawn out spring green up to where it's kind of lackluster and cold, and the forage quality, again, some of that green up is good, but some of those warm season grasses are better. If those warm season grasses aren't coming on to have that higher protein, no, they're just not going to be able to maintain the growth rate that they can in, say, other years. That's why, part of what I just talked about and what you just nailed, I'm not really, as far as antler development goes, if you don't have a monsoon, okay, that's not really what's giving you the growth. You want food in the fall, easy winter, spring green up. You want their body condition going into spring at max, at peak condition. That's what's going to give them that boost and start throwing really awesome antler quality. So, yeah, hence, again, let's circle back to what I was just saying. In Unit 9, where I was, it did not seem like there was, there wasn't a high amount. It wasn't, I don't even think it was average. I think it was below average quality forage production, which means going into this winter, if they don't move off to another area that has better forage production, if all the forage production in the area is piss poor, which means, okay, their fall forage is piss poor, which means the forage going into winter is piss poor. If all of a sudden it just doesn't get any better, they very well may have a suppressed body condition going into next spring. It'll be interesting to see what antler development ends with, what the winter looks like and the spring looks like. It'll be very interesting to see what antler development looks like next year, because last year, okay, we had a drought. There were 400-inch bulls that we had, that folks had on camera. Very distinct markings on the animal, so you know exactly what animal you're looking at. 2 years ago, he's a 400-inch bull. Last year, he's 360, maybe 370. So he's lost 30 to 40 inches of growth simply because of the just piss-poor forage conditions. But then you put a good forage year on it, and all of a sudden, bam, they jump right back to gain that 40 inches plus some. So they're incredible. So forage conditions absolutely can drive antler development in these gigantic swings to where, yeah, so next year for you guys, how's your forage production look right now? What does your grama grass look like now? Do you have a bunch of it, or is it sparse?
Not good. Not good. No summer rains. The conditions just are not good. It's not good. So hopefully something changes, and I can only hope that we don't have just a severe winter. But it's dry. It's dry all over Colorado. It's just bone dry. So,
do you have any water for down in the hay meadows and all that, or not?
The year before, we didn't even have enough water coming out of the our water rights that we have from the high country. The ditches never even ran. Water never even made it to the ranch. This year, yes, we had our full amount of water, but as soon as the water has to be shut off, which is July 15th, then we count on monsoon rains, and we didn't have any.
I didn't realize you had to shut it off that early. Ooh.
Yeah. So, but we shot a couple management bulls last week. We ended up shooting Hooker. His main beams were shorter. He was bigger. I think that he was bigger last year. It was kind of bittersweet watching him get killed, but it's one of those things. He is what he is. He scored 351. Probably last year he was probably 360, and the year before that he was probably 345, 350. And he just was one of those bulls, short main beam, long pointed looking bull, but he has short beams, so he was a perfect candidate for a bull that he's never going to blow up into a 400-inch bull with 47-inch main beams.
Yeah.
And points that look long, but they look long because they're on a short beam. And then Creed was a bull that, like I said, I think he's probably close to 15 inches smaller this year. Still just an incredible bull. The interesting thing about all the bulls, and we're sending the teeth off to get aged, but I've got a picture that I'm going to post of Loppy, of Creed, of 65, and of Hooker showing their teeth. And I'm sure you'll love to see this, but they are all old bulls. Creed we think, is going to turn out to be a very old bull. Hooker, nice. His teeth are even more worn than Creed. So we're thinking 10-plus-year-old bulls. So anyway, that was just my perception is that the antler growth is kind of a down year. Maybe that's me hoping to be optimistic and that it was just going to blow up like Arizona, but we haven't seen that in our bulls at all.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is you can't do anything about the rain. Environmental conditions are what they are. Yeah.
Another interesting thing, and then I'll let you go because I've got to run here. But we shot a bull called 65. He's a bull. He's actually a 6x6, but on one side he only has about 1.5 inches G6, and so we just started calling him 65. We have another bull we call 56, but in 17 he had really short fists, in 18 he had really short fists, and this year he had really short fists. So we decided to harvest him. My question for you is, when you see bulls with short thirds or short fists, and you see them for 3 years in a row, and let's say 3 years in a row they have short thirds, 3 years in a row they have short fists, either or both. In your opinion, in antler configuration, can they grow out of that, or is that a characteristic that will run with that bull? It's my understanding that if 3 years in a row a bull has short little dinky fists, that's his genetic disposition, and he's not gonna grow big fifth points. I'm just curious your thought on that.
Yeah, and unless you can point to the fact that for 3 years in a row you've had really crappy growing conditions, then all of his points and his whole frame should probably be a little bit suppressed. But let me take that back. Maybe he's got good initial growth, and then it just, there's no spring green.
Yeah, let's say he's got good 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and he's got short fists 3 years in a row. like 65, and then we have another bull that has it's 1, 2, 3, or excuse me, 1, 2, 4s, 5s, and beams are good, but he's got 7-inch thirds, and he's always had 7-inch thirds. I find that those are bulls that's just what they are. I mean, they're just not gonna. They're always gonna have short thirds, and a lot of times those bulls make it on my. If they've got age, and I know that they're mature, hump on their back, a mature bull. Those are bulls that go on my management list of short thirds, he's out. Short fifths, he's out. I mean, in other words, those are bulls that I want to target to try and harvest.
Yeah, no, if you've got several years of history with him, especially with several different years of different growth conditions, and his characteristics are the same every year, short thirds is good one, or short fifths, absolutely, that's just his genetic expression, and that's probably what he'll end up being. So, and then, exactly, so all the more important reason why, if all of a sudden you're out there watching, you've got at least enough acreage to where hopefully you've got some of those bulls that just live on that property, at least in the fall. I tell people here with my whitetails, I don't give a crap where they spend their summer. I really don't. I just want all the whitetails, all those bucks to pile in the fall and just spend the rest of their fall and winter on us. That way we can keep them safe, and we can feed you, make sure they've got good optimal forage. So, but if you've got bulls that are habitually on that ranch during the fall and winter every single year, absolutely, that's where if you look at a 4 or 5-year-old bull and he's just got whopper thirds and whopper fifths, or whopper fifths, you just let that boy grow. You know what I mean? You just let him go. Yep.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, even bulls that have kind of short fronts, but they have whopper backs, I'm kind of a sucker for those big backs. I'm going to let them go too. Those fifth points, consistently growing 3 years in a row, short fifth points, they're going to make it on my list pretty quick. But it's been fun over there. I'm back in over here at my summer place for a couple of days, and then we've got a couple more management hunters coming up here, so I'll be back there in a day or two. But it's been kind of fun to reflect so far on 3 seasons over there and just checking out different bulls, and it's funny to see some of the same bulls show back and have the same patterns where they show up first in a certain part of the ranch, then they end up rutting over here. They make their circle. It seems like down to the day when a bull disappears, you can go up and find him over here. There he is. He's making his circle. He's making his loop, checking for cows. It's just pretty neat to kind of, you had sent me a text, is it hard watching some of them die? Yeah, absolutely. It's, you get to naming them, you get to knowing their patterns, you get to knowing how they roll, they're aggressive or they're passive or they're, a traveler or they stay put. And it's kind of fun though to really get to know them, really intimately.
Yeah, and what I said, at least for us out here, for me out here, because of our river bottoms, there's so much movement. I mean, obviously whitetails and elk are different as far as their behavior or their breeding behavior, but for out here, it's such a linear corridors. I mean, they're just constantly moving, so it almost is like a randomized experience. You don't know who's gonna. You know that they're there, but you don't know who's gonna. Yeah, you don't know who's gonna show up in front of that hunter's stand at what point in time, and what they're gonna. Because out here, because we can't control all the movement, I just let our hunters harvest whatever they want. We just reduce the number of overall harvest, so we always have a lot of bucks to survive. So we always are going to have great bucks, but people can shoot whatever they want just because we want them to have a fun hunt, and we know we can't manage all the deer. So it becomes this kind of randomized crapshoot on what deer shows up in front of what hunter, in what point. So when someone shoots one, I'm not going down and saying, okay, Dave, go climb into the stand. You're gonna shoot, the straight 8 today. That's not even
doesn't work remotely. That way. Yeah.
No, it just go climb into the stand, sit all day, because this is where several mature bucks are going to be running through. We've got the doe group here. Let's just see what happens. And when he says, somebody says we got a buck down, it's like, okay, let's go in and see who it is. And I can't tell you how many times I show up, I'm like, well, I've never seen that buck before. So it's like, well, all right, there we go. Sweet. Congratulations. He's an awesome buck, but I don't know who he is.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate you spending time with us. I kind of got to run, so sorry to cut it short, but we'll have to do it again. I want to give you a chance, and I'll link it up in the show notes where people can listen more, find out more. So go ahead and tell them that, and then I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, as always, anytime I enjoy our talk. So, yeah, just Roe Hunting Resources, ROE Hunting Resources, wherever, whether it's our website, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, it's all the same. So you just jump on there, Roe Hunting Resources. And then, I'm just kicking in gear, getting my whitetail stuff going. So if folks want to follow along with that, then go over and follow on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and we'll get it rocking and rolling. So.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much, and be looking forward to seeing. I know you've got a bunch of elk content to post, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your whitetail stuff too. So stay in touch, and thanks for sharing with us here.
Always. Be safe.
All right, buddy. Take care.